What did you say? The voice carried on the wind, despite Violo not being here.
Now you want to die.
I watched as a shadowy arm slid out from under the table and lunged at me. Icy cold claws dug into my neck. A Violo-shaped shadow figure oozed from under the table to loom over me. Hey all you cool creatures. I'm Cryptid, welcome to the Cryptid Plays YouTube channel, and today we are continuing Sacrarium Pario. Last time, if you recall, we had seen how the character has ended up in the predicament that they are in, and now we are going to see what happens on the island with the terrifying beings that we are stuck with. I will pull up the content warnings real quick. Anyways, content warnings include gore, human taxidermy, human vivisection and dissection, flesh abominations, body horror, death, unhealthy power dynamics, dubious consent, Stockholm Syndrome. And these are all of the trigger warnings, so keep them in mind. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, we are being tossed through a door by that very odd creature, which had clearly been human at one point. The creature turned and tossed me through it. I rolled with the fall and got up on my feet, only slightly stumbling due to my leg chains. I was in a library, or a study of sorts. Books lined the walls, and tables rested in various places. Odd things and disgusting things rested on top of them. Like everywhere else in the castle, plants had begun to reclaim the space. Unlike everywhere else, blood and rotting items joined the clutter. Violo stood at one of the tables, polishing what appeared to be human ribs.
Hello!
Welcome in. He didn't bother to look back at me. Sorry to grab you, but you can't hear air elementals right now with the chains. Can your creations not talk? Originally they could. It got annoying hearing them beg to die after a while. I see. I guess that makes sense. So I removed that ability. I shuddered at the casual cruelty. He spoke about it like it was something akin to changing curtains. You're tense. Don't tell me one little creation has you panicking. You're cryptid. Surely you've seen comparable sights. I flinched. How do you know who I am? I asked around. He sat the ribs down and turned around. When he did, I saw blood stained his shirt. One of the crew rested on the table, cut into pieces. Violo had removed the muscles in his arms and legs, and the sight of them dangling from a rack made me want to puke.
Truly an intriguing situation.
I knew you were fascinating, but I didn't know you were famous before this point. He wiped his hands on his dark pants. Sword, He held his hands out. I watched as a long sword grew small little black tendrils. It used those tendrils to move to him. Once it landed in his palm, he threw it at me. I instinctively dodged away, only to see it land in front of where I'd been standing. Moth cryptid, the bane of the Tourmaline Ring, experienced mercenary with at least 12 years of credited work. You made quite the impression on one of my little roses. She remembers you with such passion. All I had to do was ask, and I received quite the story. If you did, you should know I prefer sharpshooting. I do. I find archery boring for obvious reasons. He waved a hand in front of his face. You have experience with a sword, at least a bit. You have to, since you're a mercenary in the Sacrarium seas. After all, swords are the separator of the civilian and the professional. It indicates experience and money. I stared at the sword and bit back a sigh. He was right. Swords were expensive, trade-specific tools. Most civilians who dabbled only used axes due to the added utility of having an axe. My own sword had cost me a pretty copper. I still mourned its loss. Forgive me for not coddling you. Ring hubs are even more gruesome than my home. I refuse to accept that you can't stomach it. Not when you've seen worse. Just because I've seen worse doesn't mean I enjoy the sight. I suppose that's fair. Not everyone finds comfort in the same things. Most people don't find comfort in mutilated corpses. He gave me a sharp grin and nodded in agreement. Then again, I'm not most people. He gestured to the body on the table. Anyways, don't worry. You won't end up like this quite yet. I'm uncertain if killing you would remove that unique ability of yours. Quite yet meant that it was on the table. I'm free to make you wish you were dead if you don't cooperate, though. I'd rather not expend the effort, so please don't make me. Now pick up that sword and fight me. He waved a hand. The chains that bound my wrists and ankles together faded in a flurry of flowers that drifted away. I immediately fixed my footing and reached inside myself. My energy had recovered. My third eye opened to its partial state, and I winced at the intensity of the figure before me. Power rolled off of him in waves, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was so overwhelming that my eye closed against my will. I hadn't even been able to see the elementals attached to me. I blinked a few times to get my bearings and saw where he waited. I don't like picking on people. He threw his head back and laughed. I assure you. Oh, I love this. This is cute. Wait, does he have a painting of Vivere in the back? Anyhow, he held his hands out, cutting his palms open with his thumbnails. Black blood slid out and formed two blades. One was a rapier, the other was a dagger. He held them both with practiced ease. My education was far superior to yours. You can't hurt me unless I let you. Now fight me. I need to see the limits of your endurance. His voice took on a manic edge. His usually wide eyes were even wider, and I could see the tense energy thrumming inside of him. He gave me no indicator of what he intended to do. I gripped the sword and... By the way, I think to get the dead end, we'll go with the choices that he will not like, but you won't see them again, because I'll go through all of these and then I'll go through to get the dead end second. But I let it clatter to the floor.
What?
He noticed the motion and scowled. That is not what I asked you to do. I'm not going to fight you. Something had to be off about this. Sure, he overtook the ship, but I was willing to bet that it had more to do with magic than combat prowess. I refused to risk injuring him and upsetting Vivere, who looked far more capable of crushing my skull. Violo tilted his head. You don't have a choice. Pick it up. Fury garbled his words. Anger changed his stance from calm elegance to bristling tension. No. Violo moved with unexpected speed. One moment he was a few feet away from me. The next, he was in my face. His blades were gone, and he swung an open palm at my face. It collided with enough force that I felt something in my face crack a bit. The blow almost sent me to the ground. He grabbed me by the collar and picked me up like I weighed nothing. Before I could react, my spine slammed into one of the bookshelves. Books clattered around me. Their impacts hurt like hell. I looked down at one of the open ones and realized it had touch sight paper in it. No wonder the damn things were so heavy. The longsword from before landed close enough to my face that a thin slice of red cut across my cheek. Violo stood in front of me, smile tight. You will take that sword, and you will fight me. You have to prove yourself. No, I don't. I've already proven myself to everyone who matters.
I regret this.
Violo was in my face again, leaning over me with his face twisted in rage. You have not proven it to me. To my surprise, the dagger in his hand slammed into my gut. He twisted the blade and dragged it up, sawing through my insides with ease. I blacked out, expecting to die. I woke up on the floor in a pool of my own blood with that sword resting beside me. Violo stood a few paces away, blades in hand, waiting. Pick it up. I forced myself to my hands and knees. No. His expressions are incredibly cute, in spite of how he acts. He clicked his tongue. Very well. There are far more boring ways to test your endurance. He punctuated that sentence by kicking me so hard my skull cracked. Over and over, he would overwhelm me with speed and terrifying presence. I thought he'd finished the job, but I'd wake up again, sorer. The last time, his foot rested on my chest, pressing his toe on my ribs one by one. He pressed until they cracked with a sickening noise. I couldn't even scream anymore.
Fantastic.
Well, you can take a beating. He spoke dispassionately. That doesn't mean much to me. It's not impressive. I'm a little annoyed for my little Rose. She thinks so highly of you. I expected at least some competence and forethought. I suppose it'd be easy for you to trick mortals. Should I punish you for tricking one of my roses? He rested his foot on my chest and thought about it. Maybe I should. I'll have to think about it. He stepped off of me and I felt the overwhelming presence of his power pour into me again. He reconnected my ribs to one another. Bones and organs were the hardest things to mend, yet he had done it so many times. Get out. I have what I need. He paused mid-turn away from me. I watch his eyes rotate upwards. He cocks his head back and forth a few times, like a confused dog.
What?
Now, they are probably starving, though. Violo looked in my direction. I've worked them over a bit. He nodded. Very well. His attention focused back on me again. My sunshine has sent for you. I tensed. Join him in the garden. He's promised to provide food for you. It's not poisoned, I promise. He doesn't hate you that much yet. The attempt at being comforting made me even more nervous. Where is this garden? Who knows, but I'm gonna get the other choices. Like I said, the dead end has to do with their affection points basically dropping low, so while I intend to get all of the choices kind of in sequential order, just know that I will have gone back to get all of the choices that will lead to a dead end. Alright, this time we will focus on being defensive. I think that this is probably like the neutral choice. The sword was a bit heavier than I would have liked. The balance was off too, but I'd managed with worse. I fell into a defensive posture and waited. Violo's grin widened. We were both still for a long moment, reading each other. While stories might draw out combat, experienced individuals knew it ended in seconds. In reality, whoever made the first error would die, and blades always guaranteed injury. My mind raced with how to get out of this with minimal injury.
Aww.
Adorable. I recoiled back from Violo, who appeared in front of me. Only years of practice allowed me to parry the first blow, but his dagger scored my side. I winced and looked down. If he had put force behind that, my innards would be spilling out of me. 1 point for me. His blades appeared oddly blunt. He stepped back a few paces, relaxing into a casual posture. Again. I took a steadying breath and focused. It was useless. No matter what I did, his speed was overwhelming. I dared to force open my third eye and observed he was using magic. Physical enhancement was common practice for those who combined might and magic. My own fortifications were helping me avoid getting my bones crushed. He seemed to be limiting himself. In fact, he intentionally missed a swing once. That swing cut straight through the column. Oops, too excited. Sorry. He gave me an apologetic grin. Each blow he left on me landed with careful placement. They stung, but never punctured. He deflected my counterattacks with ease. He even caught the sword with his teeth at one point. Wow, he's audacious for sure.
Fantastic.
Nice. If I were immortal, that would have bisected my head. He spat out a cracked tooth. I saw a new one already growing in his mouth. You regrow bone like it's nothing. My voice came out shaky and uneven. All the physical exertion was taking a toll on me. Just playing defensively against him was exhausting. It's so easy to impress mortals. Do you never run out of energy? How were his monolines not screaming in agony? I don't. That ability is what made me a living god, after all. It felt like a bucket of cold water dumped over me. I'd faced more powerful opponents before, knowing that more power meant more energy expended. In wars of attrition, I could win. This would never be a war of attrition. Not to say it isn't fatiguing. It does cause fatigue, but I can't die. Thus, even when my body feels like trash, I can pull myself along. I've worked through my heart giving out before, through my organs failing due to stress. Unpleasant annoyances, but not unmanageable. Right now, I feel amazing. He flipped his dagger in his hand. This is a fun little bit of exercise for me, though your condition is getting worse. I think think I have a few more bouts in me, but you're right. Violo nodded and took a few paces back. Let me know when you reach your breaking point. I nodded, then corrected myself. Yes. Good. I only had 3 more bouts in me. Like the rest, I lost with little effort from him. Violo was a deadly combatant. My hand couldn't hold the sword any longer. It clattered to the ground, and I fell to one knee. I yield. I panted and barely managed to sit instead of falling on my face. Noted. Violo threw his hands up, and I watched the blood sink back into his palms, skin healing. He walked in front of me and bent down to look at me, hands on his knees.
Fantastic.
Good showing. I wish you'd been a bit bolder. That'd have been entertaining. He raised a hand to twirl the end of some of his hair. But I can appreciate the caution. It has its place, and it's understandable a mortal would run away from me. He giggled. Most do. I'll give you some praise for at least holding your ground. Good job. He straightened up and hummed.
Aww.
Poor thing. You're exhausted now. Go on. Out with you. You can. I watched his eyes rotate upwards. Okay, so this is probably the same, so I will go back and get the last choice. All right. I resolved to do my best. I didn't know what stakes were at hand, but I knew they were high enough to care. Even if I could play it safe, that might not have been the long-term consequences I want. The creator was known for his mercurial mood and fast boredom. I couldn't risk not impressing him. It was terrifying to size him up, though. His stance told me nothing. I had no idea what he was going to do, and I didn't know how well he could read my intentions either. Swordplay alone wouldn't help me stand out. I reached inside me and pulled at my energy. The energy flowed through me, sluggish as usual. I'd never had the fastest magical reaction time. I wondered if my void contributed to that problem. That was a thought for another time. For now, I hoped his books were fireproof. I darted to the right while mumbling the words to the spell. An arcane sigil glowed in the air to his left. I surged forward to try and push him back into it. His rapier flew up and parried my sword. Before I could even think about what to do next, I felt his dagger rake across my throat. It stung like hell. No blood came rushing out. It only winded me a bit. 1 point for me. He gave me a cheeky grin. I scowled and hurried backward before finishing the spell. The sigil flared to life, erupting with flames. My monolines ached at the heavy expense, but I still had some reserves. I ducked away from the bright flame and light. I blinked and Violo stood in front of me, sword pressed against my ribcage. He hadn't even been singed.
Fantastic!
Ooh, fire. Not my favorite element, but an impressive show. 2 points for me, and I've noted that your spell work is very hard to detect. I didn't even know it was there for sure until I felt the heat. I gasped at his raw reaction time. If it was when he felt the heat, he had less than a second to move. How are your bones not dust? Oh, they crack a lot. My healing abilities make up for that. He shrugged. Bone is one of the hardest materials to heal. It takes so much energy. That was why I stopped fighting in the front lines. A broken bone meant expensive healing bills and aches for me.
What?
I'd have to be able to run out of energy for that to be a concern. The hair on the back of my neck raised. I know no such physical or magical limits. Even if my organs fail or my heart stops or my bones grind to dust, work must always be done. His grin was as happy as can be. Now try again. He moved away from me to give me space again. I sat in stunned silence for a few moments. I'd defeated powerful foes with patience time and time again. Powerful spells meant expending precious resources, so they'd always burn out. You only had to wait, but that wouldn't work here. My mind raced in the face of this challenge. In the end, I threw everything I had at him. Magical traps to try and snag him mid-motion? He tore through them with overwhelming strength. Blasts of ice, fire, and more? He dodged out of the way, increasing my own speed to the point where I felt my pinky crack. He matched it. A few times he played around with me, parrying my blows and not finishing the job until the very end. He hit me with the intention to lightly annoy, not harm. Bruises covered my thighs and side by the time the 12th bout began. I weaved on my feet, barely able to breathe. He didn't even look the slightest bit put out. How? Aren't you a researcher? The living god tilted his head at me. I come from a long line of mages and duelists, my dear. When I say my education was thorough, I meant it. Frick. I tried to raise the sword again. My mana lines were empty, and I had black spots in my vision. My balance faltered when I stepped forward. I ended up on my knees, wheezing.
Aww.
You've tuckered yourself out. His blade slid back into his hands. He walked over and stroked a hand across my face gently. I felt his power pour into me. My aches and pains faded away a bit. He pulled back before healing them completely. We're done. I promise. Apologies if you still feel a bit sore. I don't want to risk overburdening your body like last time. His voice was almost sweet, almost like he worried about me.
Fantastic.
Excellent work. For once, he actually wasn't being too loud. No, his voice was low, and my growing headache appreciated it. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb idly stroking under my eye.
I made the right choice.
I knew that I wouldn't regret this. He sighed fondly. You are enchanting. If you were trying to be impressive, you've succeeded. It's been a long time since a guest was this fun. You soar above and beyond my expectations. He leaned in close to whisper. Continue this way. It'll be good for you. I can be quite nice when motivated. He patted my cheek. Violo looked ready to say something else, but he paused and pulled away from me. I watched his eyes rotate upwards. He cocked his head back and forth a few times like a confused dog.
What?
Now, they are probably starving, though. Violo looks in my direction. I've worked them over a bit. He nodded. Very well. His attention focused back on me again. My sunshine has sent for you. I tensed. Join him in the garden. He's promised to provide food for you. It's not poisoned, I promise. He doesn't hate you that much yet. The attempt at being comforting made me even more nervous. Where is this garden? I don't know, actually. I have no idea where anything is. As he spoke, he snapped his fingers. Items in the room began to move around. After all, even if I forget where a door is, my lovely castle will just open the wall for me. He laughed a bit and shrugged. Why risk bumping into tables when I can train the tables to move out of my way? He tapped his foot while thinking. Let me get one of the 2 legs to walk you there. They don't have that privilege. Can you stand? I could, but it hurt like hell. Yes. Good. Let's not keep him waiting. To my dismay, the chains reformed once more. They severed my connection to my monolines. It made me feel even worse about the confrontation to come. What did Vivere want with me? He'd made his opinion of my presence very clear. Thus, it made no sense to me that he'd want me around. It would make more sense if he wanted me far, far away. I followed the twitching 2-legged aberration reluctantly. If I failed to show up, something would drag me there. An act of direct defiance might set him off. I didn't know what his limits were, and I didn't feel like pushing them yet. The 2-legged humanoid scampered much faster than me despite its appearance. A few times it would round a corner before poking its head back around to blow out a loud exhale in my direction. I caught up with ease, maintaining enough distance to give me room to dodge if it lunged at me. We passed other creatures that ignored me. I ignored them right back, fighting the urge to curl away from their bloated bodies. Besides the plants, they seemed to be the only living things around. That perspective changed when I reached the garden courtyard. The place was overgrown with plants of all kinds. I watched tiny earth elemental golems totter around. Their heads were shaggy messes of vines and flowers. They were almost cute to watch, pulling at weeds and watering plants. Something even more surprising was the presence of vultures. Animals detested the living gods with a burning passion. No fish swam in the blood waters due to this hatred. Despite that, these vultures sat, fat and comfortable, snacking on unidentifiable human parts. The vultures noticed me, but they paid me no mind. The aberration let out a strangled noise of some kind, bouncing in place 3 times. Then it scurried away to continue what it was doing before. Hello? I called out. This garden had many dense and high bushes, making it impossible for me to spot Vivere. A bundle of roses rose from a bush. It was an earth golem, bigger and more mature than the little ones. The golem waved a leafy hand at me before hobbling towards me. Its vine hair reached out and tugged on my chains. Please don't pull. The golem listened and let the chains go. It walked with janky, inhuman motions. When it paused to make sure I still followed, it didn't turn its head over its shoulder. No, it rotated its entire spine at the hip to look behind it. In a way, the humanoid golem was as bad as the flesh creatures in the castle. It was human enough to be disturbing. The gardens began to open up as we grew closer to the center. Oh, he looks so happy. Vivere stood near a fountain, arranging flowers in a human skull. He spoke softly to someone I couldn't see. No, do not break his study windows. I'm upset, but he cut himself off upon noticing me. The little guest has arrived. He looked at a wall of green plants. We will continue this conversation later. All right. He waited and then nodded. I will. Stay safe. Large fingers I'd mistaken for vines curled over the top and disappeared. Oh, whoa. I just noticed that those are fingers, indeed. How funny. The thing had to be massive, but it didn't make a single sound. Sorry to interrupt. It is the nature of guests to get in the way of work. I couldn't help myself. I raised a brow. Work arranging flowers? Vivere gave me a long, flat look. He raised the skull in his hands, and I watched his eyes glow. Vivere reached into his chest. His hands disappeared inside of himself. He pulled out a faintly glowing light. He slid that light into one of the eye sockets of the skull. The flowers in the skull sprang to life, growing long roots and vines that began to form a humanoid body. Flowers overtook the skull, hiding it from view. A new little golem was born. It bobbed its head questioningly a few times. Vivere gently sat it on the ground and patted its head.
How cute.
There you are, little one. Rosentahide. He looked at the older golem that still stood beside me, unable to not shake side to side even while standing still. Take this new little one and get him started on his tasks. He'll be in your plot. The golem nodded and walked over. It picked the little one up and walked away. Vivere leveled his cold gaze at me once more. Our list of tasks grows ever longer, so we need more helping hands. I've been very busy. How many elementals do you two control? The question came out before I could stop it. A few 100,000. These creations are not elementals, though. What are they, then? None of your business. I bit my tongue. I doubted angels would work with beings like Violo and Vivere. Thus, if they weren't elementals, that left only devils or something new entirely. Vivere motioned to sit down at a small table set up with food. Sit, eat. My love would be annoyed if you starved yourself. He picked up a porcelain teacup that looked almost comical in his big hands. I will force feed you if need be. Do not test my patience. I sat down at the table with a sigh, eyeing the food to determine what parts I felt safe eating.
Annoying.
There is no way in the hells you are picky as a mercenary. You're right, I'm not picky. They aren't poisoned yet. All guests get at least 6 days as a grace period. I'm not the first one up here? No, Violo keeps anything of extreme value out of the dungeons. It's been a while since we had one. Doesn't that bother you? It does. That was a very low, evil laugh. He gave me a sharp grin. Luckily, his interest is ever fleeting. 6 days is usually how long it takes him to grow bored. He took a sip of his tea. I clenched my fists under the table. The weight of that countdown had me tenser than expected. 6 days was hardly enough time to escape, or try to curry enough favor to survive for longer. Stop staring and eat already. His hand with the teacup hovered above the plate. He narrowed his eyes at me. To avoid finding out how unpleasant it would be to be force-fed, I picked a few things to eat. The tea was relaxing, not too strong in taste, nor too weak. I greedily downed the cup. I suppressed a flinch when the cup moved away from the plate and the pot moved to refill it. Is everything here alive? Yes, it's a lot harder for Violo to lose something when he only has to call for it. Can't bump into tables if they move out of the way, and so on. I wonder if the things I touched and observed in detail would report my snooping back to the pair. My cup returned itself to me and I drank more tea to calm down. It didn't help. Vivere's golden gaze pinned me to my seat, overwhelming and critical. He didn't say a word either. His silence made each clatter of cutlery sound like cannon fire. What did you want with me? There are important notes to catalog about you. Violo is too busy for such monotony.
The things I put up with.
I am going to take those notes. To begin, where and when did you receive your training? Private mentorship from a young age. Got taken under a merc's wing after my parents died. Was this mercenary famous? No, never broke into the big news. Powerful, perhaps? Standard Sacrarium spell sword. Good on land and the seas. Nothing to write home about, though. Vivere scowled. That was your only source of education? Yes. No teachings from a monastery? No secondary teachers? My only other teacher was experience. Your condition is not related to your education, then. Did you think a mortal unlocked some kind of spell? It very well could have been the case. That'd be insane. Vivere gestured to himself. I am the product of a mortal unlocking an unthinkable spell. I grimaced and took another sip of my food. I wonder if that's a typo there. No symptoms of familiar poisons kicked in. I forced myself to eat slowly to avoid getting sick. To your knowledge, is your family cursed? No, we were rather devout when I was younger. That changed. You can only see so much of the world before it shakes your faith. I see. He leaned back in his chair.
Annoying.
I don't even have to read that line. Annoyed that my condition is physical? Yes. Why? Take a wild guess. I thought about it. Don't tell me that you're that easily jealous. Very much so. Violo is too. He just doesn't speak about it openly. I mentally noted that down. Well, I might see if you're entertaining. What? Tell me, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Wait, can I sing that? I don't know if I can sing that. I was gonna sing What is Love, but yeah. I stared back at him. I failed to see the purpose of this. To see if you will be entertaining to me as well. If I have to endure your presence in my home, you might as well entertain me. Now answer me. What is love? The question had a simple and a complicated answer. Vivere let his cup go refill itself. When it settled back down, he put sugar into it and stirred the mixture. He didn't break eye contact from me while doing so. I didn't need to see into his mind to know that he was cataloging everything about my reply. I refuse to answer. I don't see the point in answering pointless questions. Pointless and unoriginal. Then again, I doubt something artificial could match human nuance. Oop. Vivere's shoulders tightened. I braced myself for another beatdown, but his eyes only narrowed. Then his face broke into a slight smirk. Personal attacks are an obvious sign of ineptitude when it comes to conversation. Can you not manage a less rash reply? I see no reason to coddle my captor. But I never to coddle me. Oh, he's probably saying, but I never expected you to coddle me. I do not want a yes human. I need a sign of intelligence in that tiny brain of yours.
Unsurprising.
Then again, I shouldn't be surprised. His casual knowing sigh made me feel defensive. What is that supposed to mean? It means that my expectations were already low.
Disappointing, as expected.
While you might be the infamous moth cryptid now, your history as a peasant is well documented. You were born without class and raised without manners. Given your parentage, it's unavoidable. The bastard continued to stare at me like I was a bug pinned to a board. Don't you dare bring my parents into this. How can I not, when their failings are so obvious? They did everything they could for me. Yet it wasn't enough. Their child has become a mannerless brute without the capacity for intelligent conversation. They're probably rolling in their graves. The poor things. I slammed my palms down on the table. My parents would be proud of me. Really? He raised a pitying eyebrow. You are so hated by your own allies that stories of betraying you are famous. Stabbed in the back, literally and figuratively. Didn't you spend some time in an Ixot prison after ending up as the scapegoat? And then there is the fact that you've turned down stable and calm work, saying you preferred the risk. The criticisms made my blood boil. Then again, since you're not the most intelligent creature, I can see why people would only use you for brawn. So again, I ask, what is there for your parents to be proud of? It's a genuine question. Something in me snapped. Some part of my brain screamed that my behavior was irrational. The experienced professional in me noted that my mood was deteriorating faster than normal. The son of a bitch probably had some kind of hex on me, but I didn't care. At least I was born. You're an abomination before the gods, and an imperfect one at that. I sat back in my chair and threw my hands out in his direction. Look at you. Who could ever call you human? You want me to throw in big words to sound smart? I can. You're nothing more than a half-baked attempt at creating something new, and I'm surprised that you weren't destroyed. After all, that's what happens to most flawed first attempts. I might be nothing more than a grimy mercenary, but I can at least say that I am a true person. What is wrong with us? I paused my rant to glare at him. He was grinning. What did you say? The voice carried on the wind, despite Violo not being here.
Now you want to die.
I watched as a shadowy arm slid out from under the table and lunged at me. Icy cold claws dug into my neck. A Violo-shaped shadow figure oozed from under the table to loom over me. Vivere sat back and watched the show, eyes glinting with delight. He is so smug. I mean, he should be. How dare you speak ill of my sunshine? The grip on my throat tightened. I tried to grab at the figure, but without magic, I was unable to grab onto it. My fingers passed through it like it was air. Black spots began to form in my vision. Watch your tongue, ingrate. I don't need you to have it. The threat was low and pressed right against my ear. Get out of my sunshine's garden before I come down there and gut you like a fish. The shadow burst into black ooze that splattered all over me. Vivere chuckled darkly before taking a sip of his tea. I bent over, coughing and rubbing my throat. You set me up. No, merely reminded you of something important. I stared at him, the question obvious on my face. No matter what you do or have. He leaned in close. I will always be more important than his research. He pulled away and waved a hand. Now get out. Violo will kill you if he finds you here now. I don't want blood on my new white dahlias. Shoot. I stumbled into a standing position and left the courtyard center. It was difficult to navigate out of the garden without a guide, but I managed. All right. Let us go back and get the other answers. I kept my answer neutral. Vivere's attitude towards me was hardly pleasant. I doubted I could do much to improve it, but I could at least not make it worse by playing along. The answer depends on who is asking. For you, I imagine love is unbridled devotion.
What?
He tilted his head. How so? Even our brief interactions have shown that you are deeply devoted to Violo. You tolerate things from him I imagine no one else would get away with. Thus, I assume you show your love with devotion. He paused to think. What about you? What is love to you? Reciprocated kindness, security, and affection. What is kindness? I fought the urge to frown. That is also something that depends on who is asking and why. You won't offend me by giving your opinions outright. I doubted that. It's a genuine opinion from me. The question requires clarity. Otherwise, the response would have to be a written essay. If I asked you to write an essay, would you do it? Can you read ink on paper? I expected offense, but he only chuckled.
Of course.
Yes. Reading and writing were part of my education. Obviously, I can read and make touch-sight documents as well. Yes, I would write the essay. I do not think they'd be good, but I could at least get all of my thoughts down. Noted. For now, what is kindness to a bitter person? Bitter in what sense? They hate the world. They'd see it as pity then. Some people can still understand kindness while bitter. Others would be unable to accept it as anything other than condescension. Vivere's serene expression did not waver. The questions continued down this line, overly vague and open-ended. Each time I would request clarification to play it safe, and I tried my best to not give my own opinions. In the end, our meal finished, and he sat back with a sigh. Well, I suppose your head is doing more than making sure your heart beats and your lungs breathe. I held back a comment on that. I can respect the caution as well. I imagine you're used to overly emotional nobles, liable to throw a fit if you say the wrong thing. Yes. I hated jobs from the nobility for that reason alone.
You are tolerable.
Neither impressive nor unimpressive. Tolerable, at least. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Observations can change. I believe it is in my best interest to see it improve. I look forward to seeing your attempts at that. For now, be off. You are done for the day. My love is coming to show me something, and knowing him, it's something gruesome. I had no desire to see what something gruesome was. Understood. I got up and gave a polite half bow out of habit before leaving. His eyes followed me until the flowers overtook me. I didn't relax until I'd made a sizable distance between us in the garden. It was difficult to navigate out of the garden without a guide. but I managed. Alright, let's go back. Alright, let's be impressive. Vivere barely tolerated me. If I wanted to keep my head, that needed to change. I worried about pushing things too far, but fortune favored the bold. Love is either something extremely fleeting or long-lasting. I've rarely seen something between these extremes. Sometimes love is a splendid night with a new face you'll never see again. Other times it's a long-lasting bond that even time cannot erode. It is also a heavy source of agony for many people.
What?
Love is agonizing? Yes. Unrequited love. Love ending too soon, mutual love falling apart. Love is popular for poets and songwriters and storytellers for a reason. It's visceral. Why do people bother with it then? It's kind of like a drug. When you're high, you're really high. When you're low, you're really low. Love withdrawal can be even more painful than love falling apart. It can lead to inferiority and self-doubt. Everyone desires love then. I nodded. Yes, I suppose in some form. Even something like me. I sucked in a breath at the pointed question. It would be hypocritical to say otherwise. He raised a brow at me. You have one thing above most mortals. His raised brow turned into a questioning grin. You can confidently say that you were created out of love. It's obvious that Violo adores you. Thus, I would say that you understand love better than many humans despite your origins. He snorted at the last bit. Well, that has to be the politest way someone has brought up my origins. He chuckled a bit and took a sip of his tea. I took advantage of the pause. What is devotion? He paused with his cup near his mouth. His pupils dilated a bit, and he tilted his head like a curious cat. Oh my god, so Violo's the dog and Vivere is the cat. Yeah, I see it. Oh. He sat the cup down and we sat in silence. Devotion is doing what must be done for the people you love no matter what. Even if it hurts you? Nothing is truly painful if it is for someone else. Even if it hurts them? Sometimes they won't understand why it had to be done until later. Short-term pain is worth the long-term benefit then? In my experience, yes. Do you disagree? Not entirely, but I have my caveats. Let's hear them then. The conversation ebbed and flowed then, bouncing from abstract concept to abstract concept. Vivere allowed me to pause to eat, so I managed to enjoy the meal too. The tension in me began to fade. Vivere's engagement was positive, and for a moment, I could forget who exactly it was that I was talking to. An odd little golem appeared while we were lost in conversation. It appeared to be made of cat bones, clay, and daisies. The little creature hopped up onto the table with a rumbling purr. Vivere didn't bat an eyelash and rubbed its bony head. A cat? One of Violo's. The only one we managed to bring with us. We weren't able to grab the souls of the others before our imprisonment, or any of his non-feline pets either. Pets, plural? Vivere let out a loving yet frustrated sigh. Yes, he had a small sanctuary in the graveyard at one point. He was devastated not knowing what happened to them. Did he keep vultures too? At the time, no. The ones we've gotten here came alongside ships. I thought animals hate... I cut myself off. Disliked being in the territory of living gods. Birds are an exception. They're children of freedom. Oh, that makes sense. They're pretty fat. Don't let Violo hear you say that. He worries they're too thin. A chuckle slipped out of me. Anyways, what is sorrow? We kept talking until the sound of someone skipping through the garden interrupted us. I expected to see them emerge from the path, but Violo stepped out of a large bush of mixed flowers instead. He held some kind of metal rack in his hands, muscles and nerves carefully pinned on it to stretch them out. My sunshine. Violo pouted while he whined. You were ignoring me.
What?
Was I? Vivere blinked in confusion, straightening his spine. His eyes flickered back and forth a few times.
My love.
I see. I hadn't noticed. I was distracted. I'm sorry, my love. Violo huffed and moved to sit on Vivere's lap. The taller man easily moved into a position to make the shorter one more comfortable. Vivere wrapped one strong arm around Violo's waist, and Violo crossed his legs while leaning back against Vivere's chest. Distracted. In a good way, it seems, since I'm not being told about scattered guest body parts. Surprisingly so. Vivere brushed his spare hand through Violo's hair. It caught me off guard, truly. The fondness and affection sharpened into annoyance when he seemed to remember I was there. But our conversation just ended. I've completed my observations. Don't forget to record them. I won't. Cryptid, off with you. I mean, if you want to stay and listen to us discuss the unique magical tensile strength in these ligaments, feel free to. I would rather not. Violo shrugged. Good day. I stood up and shuffled away. Vivere's new interest had faded away the moment Violo appeared. It was difficult to navigate out of the garden without a guide, but I managed. Another of the two-legged flesh abominations awaited for me in the castle. I had hoped I would be able to explore some more, but the creature corralled me into walking where it wanted me to. In the end, I found myself back in my current room. The door shut behind me, but I could still hear the thing wheezing on the other side of the door. My free roaming had been noted. I wouldn't be able to go out anymore today. I refused to be unproductive. I searched around the room for something sharp. Then I found a piece of furniture I could move with little noise. In a few minutes, I had 6 circles with 2 crossed out drawn on the back. 4 more days to curry favor if I wanted to survive this first week. 4 more days to try and find a way out if I wanted to risk it. I stared at the countdown and sighed. Sleeping remained difficult, and I think that is where I'm going to leave this, because this should be about a hour-ish long video. But things are getting interesting. I'm a little scared to see what happens in the dead end, because neither of these characters are at all against hurting us, or killing us, I assume. But if you made it this far, thank you all for watching. I hope you liked this video, and if you did like it, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more of me but you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe. I upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, as well as extras and shorts randomly throughout the week. I also stream on Twitch. Saturdays have been the only constant recently, so if you want to see me live, come on by then. And I hope to see you all next time. Bye.